Welcome back, guys. In this session, we're gonna set up a shooting system so that the player can start, using their gun. Aim. We're gonna have an aim camera so that you can get a better look at the enemies and things like that. You can, get a better finer look at what you're aiming, and then start shooting as well. So we're gonna set up the shooting mechanic as well. But this is broken down into two lessons. The first part of this video will be the aim camera. The second video will be the actual shooting mechanic. So follow along, make sure you don't miss any parts. So let's jump into it. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to start setting up an aim camera for players. So as you know, this is what we have right now. So let's just have a look at what we have. And let's see where we stop things up. So last time we added a jumping mechanic. We have a rolling mechanic by this point. And then we should be able to jump on platforms and move forward. So I've also added a couple of, like a sort of jumping, I don't know what this is called, like a like a platform calls over here, so you can player can sort of jump on them and make sure they don't miss anything, and jump across these platforms and get to the other side. So this is what we have so far. So feel free to build any sort of environment you wish, you guys, and then we're going to replace this with actual models later on as well. So using this, now I should be able to jump across to the other side of the world. Awesome. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add a right click to your mouse so that you can go into an aim camera mode, a combat camera. And then in the next chapter, we're going to do the shooting to this as well. So let's start setting this up. First thing we need is a aiming animation. So go to Mixamo and search for shoot, right? So there's a couple here. I want one where the player is sort of aiming the pistol. So this is a good one. But as you can see, there's a little shoot animation to this, which is fine. We definitely need that. But we need one where the player is idling in this as well. So the player is just holding and waiting for the player to press on the shoot button, which is the left mouse button. So right mouse button to aim, left to shoot. So we need a animation where the player is just holding the gun like this and waiting, right? And then as soon as you press shoot, just does this thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little sneaky thing here. We need exactly this framework up till this point. So we need basically, something like this. So just the first 4 frames of this animation. So we're going to trim the frames in Mixamo. So I'm just going to reduce this to 4 frames. 1, 2, 3, 4, like this. And we should basically get an idle animation like this, which is a very handy feature in Mixamo. With that, we can sort of trim and get rid of the animation frames that we don't need. Awesome. Let's download this. This is exactly what we need. Without the skin, FBX for Unity. And then we definitely need the full animation as well where you shoot. So I'm going to click away and then come back into shooting. So we reset this. This looks good. So we definitely need the shooting as well. So I'm going to download this animation as a whole. All right, so basically what we did was we got the original shooting animation as well as a trimmed version of the shooting animation where we only get the first 4 frames. That way we get an idle and then we get a shooting as well. Awesome. So we have 2 animations, essentially. It looks like it's 1 animation, but it's 2 trimmed together. And then I'm going to bring in these 2 new shooting animations into my project. All right, I'm going to rename this or else I'm going to get confused because they both are named shooting. All right, so let's find out which shooting animation this is. This is the one where you're idling. This is the one where you're shooting. All right, so I'm going to rename this as shooting. Yep. And this one as aiming. All right, so we don't get confused and hit apply here. All right, guys, what we're going to do is quite straightforward. Just go to the player's animator using if you just mix these lines together. So I'm going to move everything over here to this point. And then I'm going to drag. So you can only go to shooting animation from aiming. You can never go directly to shooting from idling or moving, right? So you got to be aiming to shoot. So I'm going to drag a line from aiming to shooting, right? And then one back from shooting to aiming, which means after shooting, immediately goes back to the idle state, right? So we're going to add another parameter over here. You guys are pretty familiar with the animator at this point. So click on trigger because we don't want to maintain states where like it's not going to like repeatedly shoot. It's just a pistol. But say you're doing like a machine gun, that's where you sort of need a Boolean because the machine gun will continue to shoot while the player is holding on to your left mouse button. But in this lesson, we're going to do a one-off pistol, right? for a machine gun, let me know if you guys want a lesson as well. I'll add this into this course. It might be part of the course already if you're watching this in the future. But yeah, there might be another lesson for machine guns in this course. But in this lesson, we're going to just do pistols, right? It's just a one-off thing. So we're going to use triggers for this. We're going to do shoot as the name of this parameter. And then we're going to basically click on aiming to shooting, go to conditions, click here, click plus, and then go to shoot, and then turn off has exit time. And then it'll definitely go back automatically. So you keep the has exit time true here. So after shooting, it immediately goes back to aiming. Now, how do we go from blend tree to aiming, right? So you got to add a Boolean for that because the player is holding on to the right mouse button, which means the player could be in that state for a long time, which means we can't have a trigger. Trigger is just a one-off thing that automatically goes back to its original state. But we need a Boolean so that if the player is aiming, the animation will be stuck in the aiming state until the player goes back to it, until the player releases the mouse button. So click on bool, we'll say is aiming, right? You know what to do. Click on this transition, turn off has exit time, and then click plus here, and then click is aiming equals true. Awesome. So we can immediately now go from blend tree to aiming at any time when the player presses the mouse button. Let's start coding. That's basically what we got to do now. So I have this already set up, so I'm going to bring in the code. All we need is a new method over here. We normally do. I'm going to just hide these here. I'm going to create a new method called void.aiming. Right? So what we're going to do is we're going to call this over here like we normally do in the update. But in the start aiming, we're going to not immediately aim. Obviously, we're going to check if the player is holding on to the right mouse button. So how do we do that? If input dot get mouse button down, which basically means player is pressing and holding down mouse button down. What's the difference between get mouse button and get mouse button down? Get mouse button fires once. Get mouse button down keeps on returning true if the player is holding on to it, which is exactly what we want. Because we want the player to hold on to the aiming while shooting, right? Open up brackets, I'm going to say 1. Now, what does 1 mean? Keep in mind, guys, is input mouse button 1 means right-hand side of the mouse, which is the right mouse button. 0 means the left mouse button, all right? We need 1 because it's the right mouse button we're looking for. And then what we're going to say is simply just go into the animation state, guys. So it's quite straightforward. You guys know what to do. Animator.set bool within brackets, quotes, we're going to say is aiming, exactly what we named it in the parameter section of Animator. We're going to say true, and there you go. All right. We also want the player to snap back into the normal blend tree when the player releases the mouse button. How do we do that? We're going to put it in the same method, guys. We're not going to create another one. If you want, you can, but it's unnecessary. So if you say get mouse button up, which is the opposite of down, obviously, and we say 1, it's going to detect when the player releases the right mouse button. And we can say the same thing. I'm going to set bool brackets. We're going to say is aiming, same thing, false. So we go back to what we were doing. All right, done. So with this, it should already work. All right, let's go back to Unity and then hit save. That should work. And then come back to scene. We don't have to, but we'll keep it in Animator actually. And then I'm going to click on player so we can sort of visualize this happening. And then let's run this. Actually, I'm going full screen. Boom. There we go. But I released it. Why isn't it working? Let's figure out why that is. I'm going to turn off maximize on play. Oh yeah. Yeah, I already see the problem. I don't have a line, an arrow coming from aiming back to the blend tree. Right click on aiming, back here. This arrow should be aiming equals false and turn off has exit time. All right, so that should already work. Let's try that out. Aiming, not aiming, aiming, not aiming. Awesome, that works really well. Now, this doesn't look that great, does it? Because let me just go full screen for a second. See, it's kind of hard to aim like this, guys, because obviously you got to need a reticle as well. We're gonna add a reticle in the next lesson, but it's kind of hard to aim, right? So because the camera is moving all over the place, because third-person camera is active and it's kind of annoying. We don't want that. Instead, when you're aiming, we're going to go into a combat camera, which is what we're going to set up now, right? How do we set up one? Quite straightforward. All you need is a camera inside of the player. We're not going to set up another Cinemachine. This is just a simple fixed camera that's facing the direction of the player. So quite simply, all you need is right-click the player, go to camera, right-click player and camera. Just make sure that the camera is inside of the player. I'm going to call this combat camera. All right. So what we do in the combat camera is basically, so over here, guys. So click on move tool, move it back like this until we get sort of a combat view, which is sort of like a sideways look at the world. This looks pretty awesome already. I think I like this one. This way you can sort of, the camera is not going to move around, but obviously you can turn the player, but camera is going to be sort of a fixed, in a fixed angle, just looking at what's ahead of you, and there's going to be a reticle in the middle. That way it's easy for you to aim. And you'll be able to turn the camera, but when you're turning the camera, the difference is the player is also going to look in that direction so that you can aim around, right? Which is what we're going to set up in the next lesson. In this lesson, we're basically just going to set up these things, and then we're going to turn on the aim camera, and that's it. In the next lesson, guys, it's a continuation. We're going to set up the scripts, right? I just wanted to break this into 2 parts, or else it's going to be a long lesson. It's going to be boring for you. So I'm just breaking it into 2 parts. So what do we do? When we right-click, what we're going to do is we're going to turn on our combat camera, right? So which means, hide these things. Over at the top, guys, I'm going to create a couple of variables. I just call this aiming, I guess, and we'll simply say we'll just need a reference to the aim camera, the combat camera, guys. So we're gonna just create that camera variable up here. So simply let's say public game object combat camera. Right, so combat camera. There you go. Right. So simply all we're gonna do, guys, is just turn that on. And when we turn it on, that camera is going to turn on, and we're not going to turn off the third-person camera. We're going to leave it on. But just in Unity, keep in mind that it's additive. The cameras are additive. So when you have a camera that's already active, which is third-person camera, and you turn on another camera, that camera takes priority. So this camera is still recording. You can still see through that camera, but this camera will be projecting to the game window. Right, so it's additive. If you turn on another camera on top of the combat camera, that camera is going to be turned on. Right, I hope that makes sense. And when you turn off this camera, the second one comes back into play. And you turn off the combat camera, it goes back to the third person. Right, just a little theory there, so you understand what's happening. So what we do is when you're aiming, we're going to turn on the combat camera. So how do you do that? This is also a really important one, part of scripting in Unity C#. Combat camera dot set active, which basically turns on the combat camera, and then set true semicolon, which just basically turns it on. And we're going to do the same thing over here, but false for turning off the combat camera. Right? Set active is basically what we use to turn on game objects and turn off game objects. How do we do that in Unity? Let's go back here. When we start off the game, do we want to be in combat camera mode? No, because we want it to be in third-person camera. So on the right-hand side here, if you select combat camera in the inspector, there's a little check mark there. If you turn that off, it's deactivated. Well, we're going to allow the script to activate it again. That's what we did with this .set active, right? So now what we're going to do is go to player. You should see a new variable here for combat camera that we just created, right? Drag in the third-person camera, combat camera, and drop it in the combat camera section. So you should be good to go. So let's test that out. Now in game mode, if I right click, we're in the aim camera. But obviously I can't look around because that's the scripting that we're going to do in the next lesson. But when you release that, you go back into the third person camera, which is awesome. All right, see, that's pretty good. Now, another thing that the script is also going to fix is see how I'm turned this direction. But when I right click, that's all good. When I right click here, do this, it's basically looking at the direction that the player is currently in, which is all right. It works good already. So now I should be able to just look into different directions. So it doesn't matter that the camera is turned this way, the third-person camera. It's always going to take a priority of where the player is currently turned to aim. Right? So this is good. Awesome. So what we're going to do next is, guys, in the next lesson, we're going to set up the script so that you can aim around while you're in this mode. And then we're also going to set up our gun mechanic as well, so you can start shooting. That being said, guys, that's it for this lesson. I'll see you guys in the next video.